Thank you, Garrett, and thank you for letting me be here. And you're right. 2020, this is an extraordinary, we keep hearing the word unprecedented year. And we do need to have everyday courage for these extraordinary times. So before I start, let me just define a couple of terms. Here's what I mean by everyday courage. We're not going to be talking about Medal of Honor bravery. We're talking about the everyday courage of the housekeeper who goes into a patient's room after a COVID patient's been discharged and cleans it. The nurse who holds a patient's hand and maybe holds up the phone or the iPad so they can talk to their family one last time. The everyday courage of the EMS person, the paramedic, who doesn't know what they're going to see when they show up. They don't know if the person's got COVID or not. The everyday courage of the person at the checkout line at the grocery store. We're talking about everyday courage, and it begins with self. So I'm gonna, my presentation's in two parts. Part one, we're going to talk about being positive, being emotionally positive, and what are some things you can do to do that. And part two, you see the little footnote on my opening slide there. I'm going to share with you 9 words that can change your life, but they're words you have never heard before because I made them up. Now, we're going to have homework. I have, for anybody who signed up for this event, I'm going to send you 3 ebooks. One, Winning the War with Yourself. I'm not a big fan of using military metaphors for the world of business, but there is one war that you absolutely must win, and that is the war with yourself. You must be able to master your ego, your emotions, if you want to be your best self and achieve your most important goals. Second is the workbook for everyday courage for extraordinary times. And third, I'll wrap up today talking about creating a more positive vision for your future, creating a memory of the future. And there's a guidebook that walks you through 10 steps for doing that. And I'm going to send you those things. I am also, and for some reason my advancer's not working here. I'm also going to notify you, this is such a challenging time, and it's going to get even more challenging for a while. And so we're launching a project in mid-January that's going to be free for everybody, called Stay Strong for Us, because we need to have our caregivers, and we're all caregivers one way or another. And I love this image, which will be the cover of the ebook that we're producing, of the nurse standing up to the COVID monster and saying, "This far and no farther." And this will be a compilation of messages from healthcare leaders, from authors, and it will include a lot of strategies, some of which we'll talk about today. So I'm going to send you all that as follow-up, as homework to what we're going to be covering today. And I want to start by talking about the ultimate paradox of life. And this is it. Whatever you most need in your life, at any time in your life, will be hardest for you to find at precisely the time you need it the most. It's easy to be motivated when everything's going great. Your job's going well, you got money in the bank, the kids are happy, you're about to go on vacation, you're motivated. But it's also irrelevant because things are already going great. It's when you've lost the job, the kids are in trouble, your health is failing. That's when it's hardest to be motivated. That is also when it is most important. And if you wait until you need it to work on it, you might be too late. It's easy to have integrity when there's no temptation. It's when you find the $100 bill sitting on someone else's desk and you haven't paid the rent this month that is hardest to maintain that integrity. It's easy to have courage when your fears are small. It's when your fears are large and monstrous, like that COVID monster I showed you. That's when it's hardest to find courage. That's also when you need it the most. It's easy to persevere when you're going over speed bumps. Anybody can do that. It's when you hit the brick wall that it's most tempting and easiest to stop, turn around, give up. That's when having a sense of perseverance, what we'll talk about later, is going to be so important for you. It's easy to be committed to serving others when you have everything you need yourself. It's when you don't have everything you need that it's hardest for you to give of your time, to give of your financial resources to somebody else who needs it even more than you do. But that's also when it comes back to you in the most powerful and profound ways. And I'm haunted by this image. This is August of 1914. Europe went to war, and the soldiers, all volunteers at this point, are marching off to war. Their leaders have told them, you'll be home by Christmas. This will be a short war. And the ladies are throwing flowers and the big brass bands are playing. This picture is November 1918, 4 years later. This is them coming home. There were no brass bands, no girls throwing flowers. This is referred to as the lost generation because of what they went through in the war. And this contrapositioning of these two images truly haunts me, because that's what I'm seeing happen today. You know, back in the early spring, we got this, and, you know, we're all in this together, and it's all hands on deck. And our communities were sending us pizza and donuts and things like that. And we're not seeing that nearly so much anymore. These are headlines just in the last week. Healthcare workers burned out, coming home in tears, combat fatigue. We're seeing much more. We're not seeing burnout as much anymore as we're seeing PTSD. We're seeing hospitals being overwhelmed, and it's gotten worse in the weeks since I copied these headlines. And we have to stay the course. We have to intensify our efforts to help our people work through this if we're going to avoid something like this, metaphorically. A book that just came out, Why Cope When You Can Heal, about PTSD with COVID heroes. My friend Diana Handel and her colleague, who's a psychiatrist, wrote that while we may have a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the vaccine and the virus itself, we may be facing a serious mental and emotional health crisis. If COVID-19, they say, was the earthquake, then the emotional aftershock is going to be what we're going to be dealing with. And that might be an even longer period of time. And this whole webinar is about you personally. We're not talking about culture or your organization, but I do want to point this out. Culture is shaped by the collective attitudes and behaviors of the people who work in an organization. And if leaders are not conscientiously investing in their culture, if they leave it untended, as Admiral Eric Olson wrote in the McKinsey Quarterly, the culture will go someplace you don't want to see it go. And once it goes there, it's going to be impossible to get it back. And, you know, we're seeing that in a number of organizations. We're seeing some very positive things happen, you know, teamwork, fellowship, we're all in this together. We're also seeing some very challenging and stressful things happening with culture. And there are three insights that guide our work at Values Coach. One, culture does not change unless and until people change, because, as I said, culture is shaped by the attitudes and behaviors of the people who work there. But two, people will not change unless you give them a new approach. You know, we've all had the New Year's resolution show up dead on arrival. We've all said, this year I'm going to lose weight, get out of debt. And we haven't done it. And this is why so many programs that hospitals implement become program of the month, because there's no personal investment in it. And that's the third guiding insight. The best way to help people be better employees is to help them be better people. And it has never been more important than right now, when everything I'm hearing is that as stressful as it is at work for people, the stresses at home are even more challenging for many people, with kids needing to be home, with perhaps a relative not working, you know, a spouse who's lost a job. The stresses are 360-degree today, more than I've ever seen them in my lifetime. I got an email from, or actually a letter from a CEO of a hospital that we had worked with for a long time. And he said, I got a whole new team and didn't have to change the people because they changed themselves. And I've come to see that as the gold standard of culture change. When enough people take to heart the things we're talking about today and make positive changes in themselves, then you will see a positive impact across the organization with the culture. And I imagine you've seen this meme on the internet, many different varieties of it. Tabby cat looking in the mirror and seeing a lion look back. And of course, that raises really good questions, doesn't it? Who could you be? What goals would you achieve if you didn't let fear stop you from being that person? and doing the work to achieve those goals. If you did a better job of living your values. And it's a great metaphor, it's a great image, but for most of us, the reality is more like this. We're the lion looking in the mirror and pretending to see less than what's really there, looking back at us. We give in to negative self-talk. We give in to the negativity of people around us. We give in to low self-esteem. The dreams and the goals that we once had sort of fade away, and it becomes another day, another dollar. Work sucks, then you die. And the challenge is, how do you remember who you were? How do you go back to being that lion in the mirror? I love this bumper sticker. I used to have superhuman powers, but my therapist took them all away. And isn't that what happens to us? You know, little kids think they can do anything, and then they run into teachers and parents and schoolyard bullies, and they go to work and run into bosses and negative coworkers, and it becomes another day, another dollar. And this is maybe a more appropriate metaphor. It's a painting by Lucia Heffernan, and it's the tabby cat looking in the mirror and seeing the tabby cat, but painting the tiger. And it's not enough just to see who you could be. You have to do the work to become that person, beginning with the things that we're going to talk about today. So imagine this. You go to the airport, you're there early, and there are only two people in the waiting area. And one of those two people is really weird. In our society, which one do people say is weird? One, over in one corner, there's a guy eating a cheeseburger that's so big, fat, greasy, and gross, he had to drive a stake through it before he could eat it. And out in the corner is a woman doing push-ups. And of course, in our culture, people walking by are going to look at her and say, doing that at an airport? Man, that's weird. You do something that's going to make you unhealthy and eventually kill you. People walk by and say, ooh, that looks good. Where'd you get it? You do something that's going to make you stronger, healthier, and a better role model for your kids, and people think something's wrong with you. And if you want to become that lion in your mirror, you have to be willing to do, at least metaphorically, your push-ups in the airport. And it all starts here. Famous crooner tune, accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative. And I want to start by sharing with you a simple promise that will change your life if you take it to heart. And if enough people take it to heart, it will transform your organization, and it will be in the things that I email you as follow-up. And it's the pickle pledge. I will turn every complaint, my head is killing me, into a blessing. Thank God for modern pharmacology. There's a pill I can take, or a constructive suggestion. The first symptom of dehydration is a headache. I should drink some water. There's nothing you can complain about that you cannot find a blessing and something you can do about it. So you go from being resentful, complaining, to being grateful. You go from learned helplessness, nothing I can do about it, that's why I'm complaining, to having a sense of initiative. Don't just whine about things, you do something about it. And this pledge, this pickle challenge has taken on a life of its own. People are declaring their workspace to be a pickle-free zone. This is Children's Hospital New Orleans, obviously pre-COVID. They go around with a pickle cart. Have a pickle, don't be a pickle. They're still doing it, by the way. They just have everybody masking and distancing, and they can't have the pickle jar anymore because everything's got to be individually wrapped. People are bringing in pickle jars and they fine each other. If you're caught BMW, the bitching, moaning, whining, complaining club, you're invited to put money in a jar. This is my very favorite. We've seen some incredible decorations. This is not one of them, but this is the best message I've ever seen. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Whining and complaining has never solved a problem. It doesn't matter. Talking about a coworker behind that person's back has never made another person be a better person. Quite to the contrary. It takes courage to stop complaining and actually do something. It takes courage to stop talking about somebody and actually go talk to that person. But those are the conversations that really matter. We have seen hospitals raise over $100,000 for charities by turning more than 400,000 complaints into 25-cent donations, including this from Methodist Hospital in San Antonio, where the Pickle Squad, pictured here, raised over $7,000 by turning complaints into contributions. Back to the paradox we started with, though. doing the pickle pledge, doing the pickle challenge is really easy when things are going great. Everybody's in a pretty good mood. You can say, oh, I think you should put a quarter in a jar. Okay. It's times like now when the complaints are real. It's times like now when people are under incredible stress, incredible pressure, that it's most important for us to remind each other that we have to choose to be positive. We have to find the blessings in our problems. We have to be committed to doing something about it. That's also when it's the hardest, because the complaints are legitimate. And it takes courage and determination for us to not allow our culture and our attitudes to start circling the drain, because we have a lot of excuses for that to happen. And to be emotionally positive, you have to reprogram your own inner negative self-talk. Back when we could do such things, I used to do a lot of keynote events, and I would do live polling. And I always ask this question: if you could read my mind, what would you see? And 7 out of 10 responses, and we're talking thousands of people, almost all healthcare professionals in big conferences, live polling, 7 out of 10 tell me that they struggle every day with negative self-talk. I sympathize with that because I too am one of them. Here's the problem. Negative self-talk is telling yourself lies about yourself and then believing those lies to be true. And as you embrace the lie as your reality, it becomes your reality and you act your way into it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And many of us have taken classes on public speaking, but nobody has ever taken a class that I know of on the most important speech you ever give, which is the one that you give to yourself all day, every day. Do you ever take a class on what to say when you talk to yourself? How to talk back to yourself when that inner voice is beating you up or telling you you're not smart enough or good enough? And it's been going on so long, we don't even notice it anymore. What's the first word that every kid learns to say? No. Why? That's all they hear. No, don't touch that. No, put that down. No, don't do that. When you're a 3-year-old, no, don't play in the street is really good advice. But what happens is that primordial no that we hear over and over and over again sticks up there and it metastasizes. No, don't play in the street becomes no, don't start a business, you might fail. No, don't ask for the date, you might get rejected. And we talk ourselves out of being our best selves by listening to that voice. And it's been going on so long, we don't even notice it. It's like graffiti in a New York City subway. Don't even notice it anymore. In fact, you might start to think it's beautiful. How can negative self-talk be beautiful? It is the best excuse you will ever have for watching TV. Oh, I'd probably get rejected, so I won't ask anyone to go out with me. I'll just stay home and watch TV. Oh, I'm not good enough to go to school and I'm not smart enough to get a master's degree, so I'll just stay home and watch TV. That voice up there is not your friend. It is not beautiful. It is always trying to talk you out of being a better person, always trying to talk you out of trying something, always trying to convince you to take the less courageous route. And it is not your friend. And here's a key point. And if you pay attention, you'll recognize I am telling you the truth here. Pay attention. Anytime you get negative self-talk, I guarantee you it will always be in the second person. You'll never hear, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. Nobody likes me. It's always as if somebody else is talking to you. Pay attention. You'll see what I'm telling you is right. It's like, you idiot. How could you have done that? It's like this little conversation going on up there. And why is that? Why does it always sound like it's somebody else talking to you? Because that's exactly what it is. That's not the real authentic you. That's not your soul talking. That's a malignant echo of things that you have heard in a distant past. You know, who first told you that you're not smart enough, not pretty enough, that you don't belong, that you don't deserve? That voice is still up there echoing around, and it's metastasized. It's like graffiti spreading out across the attic of your mind. And how do you talk back to a disembodied voice? One way that we use is to create a metaphor. A metaphor is a word picture. You know, if I say the new running back for the Cowboys is a real tank, you get an immediate picture of that guy. You know, he's big, strong, unstoppable. You probably think you know something about his intelligence level. If I say he's a real marshmallow, you get a completely different picture. That one word, that is the power of a metaphor. And we use them all the time. How you doing? I'm hanging in there. Who hangs? Criminals, desperate people. You pay attention to the metaphors you use to describe your world. How do you talk back to that disembodied voice? You create a metaphor. It's 3 steps. Step number 1, when you hear that voice, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, nobody's listening to you. Visualize the words as clearly as you can for what they are. Mental graffiti scrawled around in the attic up here. Go to Google Images, and type in spray can vandal. That's where I found this guy. You'll see hundreds of cartoons and drawings. Pick one that resonates with you. This guy happens to resonate with me because it feels like what's up here telling me, don't try that, don't do that. And anytime I get negative self-talk, and I mean quite literally, I stop and visualize that little vandal running around and spray painting nastiness up here in my mind. Step number 2, if you're going to have graffiti up there, you need to have a janitor to clean it out and replace it with good stuff. Again, go to Google Images. That's where I found these. Pick one that resonates with you. Visualize it. Make it a part of your mental mindset up there. This is my guy, Spike. And every time I get that negative self-talk, you're boring, no one's listening to you, you're a fraud, nobody likes you, you'll never amount to a hill of beans, something I heard a lot growing up. I go, and I mean literally, and I'll say silently to myself, Spike, get that out of here, clean that up, paint that over, and visualize my guy coming along and painting it out. And step number 3, remember I said negative self-talk is telling yourself lies, bad lies. Positive self-talk is telling yourself lies too. By definition, if you use an affirmation, you don't believe it. You're trying to talk yourself into it. If you're going to lie to yourself, why not replace bad lies, you're not good enough, with good lies? I'm going to do this. Give you a real world example. Gullickson was a tennis pro who was notorious for choking on tiebreakers. And he hired a mental toughness coach, Jim Lair, who wrote the book, Mental Toughness. And Jim Lair said, Gullickson, I want you 25 times a day to make a fist and say, Gullickson loves tiebreakers. I want you to write it out on the seat of your car. It's on your bathroom mirror. And Gullickson said, Coach, I hate tiebreakers. I always choke. And Lair said, I don't care. You do it anyway. And he did. And about 2 years later, Gullickson found himself in a tough, tight championship match. And he heard the voice in his head say, if I, not you, first person, if I can get this guy into a tiebreaker, I know I can beat him. He got him into a tiebreaker and he beat him. What he had done, he had replaced that negative self-talk with something positive. And then, remember I said negative self-talk, if you believe it, becomes your reality. Same thing with those positive lies. You convince yourself of something good about yourself, it will eventually become your reality. About 10 years ago, I read this book, The Mind and the Brain by Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz. He's a neuropsychiatrist at UCLA. And it's about neuroplasticity, the ability of the human mind to rewire itself, to reconfigure the wiring up here physically in response to experience, but also directed mental thought. I was so excited by this, I called him up. We talked for about an hour. We talked about culture and is changing culture. Is this a good metaphor for changing culture, rewiring your own hardware? He said, yeah. And I told him about this silly game that I play, the janitor in your attic, and that I recommend to others. And I asked him, I said, if somebody made a good faith effort to visualize a janitor wiping out negative self-talk and replacing it with something positive, and they did it for long enough, would you be able to use SPECT imaging or fMRI or some other technology and see actual physical changes in the wiring of their brain? He said, absolutely. And he went on to describe the science behind it. And I'll tell you, since that conversation, I have gotten a lot more friendly and intimate with my guy, Spike, a lot more aware of the vandal up there running around and what he's trying to do. And I've become a whole lot more emphatic at telling other people, hey, if what you're doing now isn't working, and for 7 out of 10 people, it's not working, maybe you should try this. So why don't you do that? Go to Google after this call, go to Google and type in spray can vandal, type in janitor, housekeeper, whatever, and try to use this metaphor yourself to eliminate, reprogram negative self-talk. So let's shift into part 2 and talk about words. Words matter. You know, words can change the world, can't they? In 1932, we were in the depths of the darkest, deepest days of the Great Depression. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in his first inaugural address on the radio, said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." And that was a turning point. I mean, it took a number of 7 more years until World War II started, but within a week of Roosevelt saying we have nothing to fear but fear itself, bank runs stopped, people's mindsets changed. 10 years later, Winston Churchill said, "We shall never surrender," at a time when it looked like Britain didn't have a choice but to surrender to Hitler. That strength, the power of those words, "I have a dream," Martin Luther King, words matter. The words you use to yourself matter. I like to make up words, and I want to share with you 9 words for your new year. And with each one, I'm going to ask you a question. These words are not, at least not yet, in the dictionary. Don't look for them because I made each of them up. And the first made up word I want to share with you is stretch. Stretch is a combination of the words stretch and reach. And what I mean is stretch yourself personally and expand your reach by accomplishing more. You've probably heard of the comfort zone. This is a well-known diagram of the comfort zone. And, you know, we're in our comfort zone, we're watching TV and having some ice cream and everything's good. But human nature demands that we try to grow. I mean, if everybody had always stayed in their comfort zone, we'd still be hunting and gathering. There'd be no universities, no hospitals. So we try something new, but that's scary. And we get out into our fear zone where we don't have self-confidence. We find excuses to go back to the comfort zone. If we keep pressing ahead, we learn, we grow, we get out into the learning zone. And then as we learn, as we get better, we get into the growth zone where we have found our purpose and we're living our dreams and we're setting new goals. The growth zone sounds an awful lot like the comfort zone, doesn't it? Feels pretty comfortable out there. And what this diagram is missing is that this is an iterative, ongoing process. You get to the growth zone and you're going to try something new. You're going to get back to the fear zone. You never go to the growth zone and just stay there. And that's so important to learn, to be comfortable with a constant state of being uncomfortable and dealing with fear, because you want to learn and you want to grow. You never get out there where you can just say, "Okay, I'm done now," because you slip back into your comfort zone and you fail to grow. You fail to learn at that point. And how do you get through the fear? You do something. You take action. Action is the hacksaw that cuts through the prison bars of fear. You can't think your way through. You can't wait for the fear to go away, because it won't. It'll just get worse. You have to do something. Susan Jeffers, the title of her well-known book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. As Ralph Waldo Emerson, the famous American essayist, said, "Do the things you fear and the death of the fear is certain." Of course, that fear dies and it's replaced by another one at some point, but you grow internally. Each time you overcome a fear, you get better at doing it and more likely to overcome it the next time. So I saw this picture on the internet. When was the last time you did something for the first time? And for most of us, it was a long time ago. So here's my question for 2021. What is the single most important way that you can stretch yourself personally, and expand your reach by doing something that you've never done before, doing something for the first time? Here's the second word, prosilience. You know, resilience, this is an article that came out earlier this week in the Harvard Business Review. A Danish psychologist wrote it, And she said, resilience, she does a lot of research and work with the military. She said, resilience is the most fundamental quality for navigating a time like this through chaos. Because if you have resilience, you will prevail because you see setbacks as being temporary, not permanent, local, not everything, and changeable. You have the power to do something. And I agree. In fact, pandemic was obviously the word of the year from Merriam-Webster this year. I think next year, 2021, I predict their word of the year will be resilience. That's how important it's going to be next year. But it's not enough, is it? Because resilience is always after the fact. You get back up after you have fallen down. You rebuild after the storm has come through. You restart a business after it has failed. Resilience is always looking in the rearview mirror. It is always after the fact. Prosilience, the word I made up, is before the fact. You work on the ability to be resilient before something happens. It is prospective resilience. Prosilience is prospective resilience. And like Harold Kushner promised in his best-selling book, it's not if bad things happen to good people, it's when. Something's going to happen. We're all going to have health problems, financial problems, career problems, family problems. They are inevitable. Randy Posh, in his wonderful book and video, The Last Lecture, he wrote, brick walls are not there to stop you. They are there to make you prove how much you want something. The walls are not optional. What is optional is letting them stop you. And back to that paradox that we started with, if you wait until you hit the brick wall to work on the strength to come through it, you're more likely to stop than if you have anticipated what that brick wall is going to be and cultivated that inner strength to plow through it. And it's really the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell came up with. It's this whole process, but here's the key point. The pivot in any story is the ordeal, the challenge. It's when the knight falls off his horse, loses his sword in the mud, and the dragon is breathing over him, and we want to close our eyes and close the book. But somehow he finds his sword, slays the dragon, and rides off into the sunset with the beautiful maiden. And that is the story of every story. Beowulf, the Odyssey, Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, every fictional classic is the hero's journey. You look at the people you admire in history, the real people. We admire them most for the ordeal that they came through. We think of Washington at Valley Forge, Florence Nightingale at the Scutari Barrack Hospital, Martin Luther King writing his famous letter from the Birmingham jail. Ben Horowitz is now he's a venture capitalist, and he's written several books, and he wrote this was an interview that I read, and he said, I talked to a lot of CEOs, and the mediocre CEOs, when I ask them, how'd you do it? They say, oh, I was brilliant. I had a great business sense or whatever. And he said, the great CEOs all say the same thing. I didn't quit. That is working on prosilience. Muhammad Ali told the world over and over that he was the greatest. And what made Ali the greatest? I don't believe it was his 37-5 record, 57-5 with 35 knockouts. I think Muhammad Ali became the greatest on March 31st, 1973. He had what was supposed to be a tune-up fight for his showdown with Joe Frazier with an unknown boxer named Ken Norton, and Ken Norton broke his jaw, beat him to a pulp. Ali did not make excuses. He did not give up. He said, I didn't train hard enough. He didn't disparage Ken Norton and say he was a bum. He said, he's the toughest man I ever fought. And in their rematch, 2 rematches, Ali beat him. And in his 2 fights with Joe Frazier, he won. Why? Because not just resilience, he knew going ahead of time, he had to be better prepared. He had to work on. That's what made Ali the greatest, was that he bounced back and he used that defeat to make himself stronger. And so prepare for the inevitability of bad things happening in an uncertain way. You don't know what the next problem is going to be. The way a fire department prepares for the next fire. They don't know what it's going to be. A house fire, a kitchen fire, a plant fire. They don't know. So they train generically. They train on skills for the things that are going to happen, but they don't know the details. How do you get yourself in shape financially, physically, emotionally, spiritually, so that when bad things happen, you're going to not quit, not step back. You're going to have prosilience and be able to plow your way through. What is one brick wall that you should anticipate during 2021? And what can you do now to make sure that when you hit that wall, you have the resilience because you've worked on it prospectively? Here's my third word, e-bags. We all carry around emotional baggage. It drags us down, it causes us pain, it prevents us from being our best selves and achieving our most important goals. And again, how do you set aside a bag you can't see? So you create a metaphor. Here's one thing we do in our workshops, back when we could do workshops, is I would bring in a bunch of rocks and invite everybody to pick up a rock and write on that rock, what is some invisible baggage, emotional baggage holding you down? Every time I sit down to write or to prepare for a webinar, I have an audience looking over my shoulder telling me how bad it is. It's my invisible audience. If I listen to them, I never get anything done. And I explain this to everybody. I say, write the word the baggage you want to let go of on your rock. At the end of the program, usually this is a multi-day program, bring your rocks up to the front of the room, give them to me. And this is actually a class from Children's Hospital New Orleans. Everybody wrote on their rock what they wanted to leave behind. And I promised them that I was going to take it somewhere where it couldn't escape and they'd never see it again. And one by one, I threw each rock into the Mississippi River. And I came back and I said, okay, your rocks are gone. Now, does it come back? Of course, but it gives you the ability to say, oh, wait, I know what you are. You're the grudge I've been carrying around that Joe threw in the river. You're the fear that has stopped me from applying to graduate school. And Joe threw you in the river. So I'm going to fill out my application. I'm going to make that call. Setting aside the emotional baggage in a metaphorical way, bury it in the desert, throw it in a lake, is a way of helping you make something tangible that you can't see. And when you make it tangible, it's easier for you to deal with it. So a question, if you're going to carry around a rock and then throw it in the river or whatever, what emotional baggage, what grudge, what fear, what anger are you carrying around that's making it hard for you to be happy and successful? And how are you going to get rid of it? Word number 4, become a Dionarap. Again, don't look that word up. It's not in the dictionary yet. Dionarap is the word paranoid spelled backwards. You know, paranoia is looking out the window and assuming something bad is out there. It's assuming the world's a scary place. It's assuming that people are not trying to be helpful. Being a Dionarap means looking out the window metaphorically at the world and assuming that it's a good place, that people are good, that people want you to be successful. Dionaraps have this sneaky suspicion that the universe is out there sneaking around trying to help them be happy, trying to help them be successful. If you assume that people like you and want you to be successful and they're always acting in good faith, sometimes they're not, but make them prove they're not before you assume it. Assume that when somebody says no, they're not really saying no, they're saying not yet. You'll have the emotional stamina to go back and ask again. If you expect the best from other people, that's probably what you're going to get. And there's actually a fair amount of research on this. What you expect of yourself, what you expect of other people has a big influence on what you actually get. So why not expect the best? Why not look at the future through rose-colored binoculars? Assume the best things are going to happen. It's a challenging time right now. How do you become a Dionarap, a reverse backward paranoid, when you look at what 2021 is going to bring for us? And so the question is, what element of your mindset is causing you to look around the world and say, oh, it's a scary place. People are always out to get you. What do you have to change so that you can be somebody who expects the best from yourself, from other people, who expects the best from your own future? One way to help you do that is my next made up word is NEDLOG. the Ned-Log rule. The Ned-Log rule is actually the golden rule backwards. You know, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, is a fundamental principle of almost every spiritual tradition ever. Ned-Log is the word golden spelled backwards. It's the golden rule in reverse. So anything you'd be willing to do for somebody else if they asked you to do it, the golden rule, be willing to ask for that same help yourself if you need it. Because you cannot pour from an empty pitcher. And this is my fear of what's happening in healthcare right now. People who go into healthcare are so committed to other people, so committed to service. They'll work 12, 14 hours day after day, and they don't ask for the help they need. And they keep going until they burn out. They keep going until their pitcher is empty. And you have to be willing to ask for help when you need it. And I think especially now, you know, a hug is such a great metaphor. The only way to get a meaningful hug is to give someone else a hug. You know, hugging yourself is kind of a narcissistic thing to do, and it's not terribly rewarding. Asking somebody else for a hug is a benefit to both of you. So here's a question for 2021. Looking ahead, what help do you anticipate you might need during the year? Metaphorically, a hug, whatever it is. And who, thinking ahead, who might you ask to give you that help when you need it? Word number 6, procrastination. Procrastination, we all experience procrastination. It's putting off today's work into tomorrow, with the result that you're always living in the shadow of yesterday, and you perpetually are deprived of the joy of experiencing the one day, the here and now, that will never come back. Why? Because mentally you're thinking about the things that you haven't done, the things that you've been putting off. And inevitably procrastinating today as things build up and pile up means you're going to be overcommitted tomorrow. Procrastination is goofing off before the work is done. Procrastination is getting the work done now with a sense of urgency, getting it done faster than you would have ordinarily, so you can goof off afterward. You know, we've only got 24 hours. You can goof off before or after you get the work done. So tell me, what side of the work is goofing off more enjoyable? Before you've gotten it done and you're playing pool and this voice in the back of your head is saying the taxes aren't done, the report's not done. Or is it more enjoyable afterward when you go, hey, I got a little time, I'm going to go for a quick hike or shoot some pool? So here's a question for next year. What is the single most important action that you've been putting off? And how are you going to not procrastinate? How are you going to postcrastinate and get it done so that during 2021, you've got some time to refill that pitcher? Word number 7, OBY. OBY. I have a sign in my office that says the one big yes requires lots of little no's. You want to write a book? You don't have 4.5 hours a day to watch television, which is what AC Nielsen says the average American does. You want to start a business? You don't have enough money to go shopping therapy every time you get bored or depressed. The more you're willing to say no to all the stuff, all the trivia, and the world is absolutely on a mission to deprive you of your attention and your money. And unfortunately, again, back to the live polling that I do. And again, this is thousands of people in big conferences doing live polling. And I ask, what % of your work hours are devoted to your number one personal priority? And only 20% say that it's more than an hour a day. Most of us are down there to a couple of minutes a day. And for a few people, it's a negative number. So here's a way to overcome that. Make 2 lists. Most of us have a to-do list. I don't know how you get through a day without a to-do list. You know, I've done things that are not on my to-do list and written them down so I could scratch it off. That's how motivating it is. But the second list is a whole lot shorter. It's your big ticket item list. This is not a bucket list. This is not, oh, gee, someday maybe I'll get around to it. This is something that you want to do now. It's important to you now, not when you're old and tired and finally have enough time, which usually doesn't happen anyway. I want to go to business school, get an MBA. That is a big ticket item list. So here's what you do. When you finish your to-do list, make sure that there's at least one item on that list that will help you get to business school, that will help you write your book, that will help you get out of debt, whatever your big ticket item is. Circle that item in red. Now, if you're like me and most people, it's going to be at the bottom of your list. It's going to be down there at the bottom and you'll never get around to it. The end of the day has come and you haven't gotten through the stuff you have to do. So what you do is you make sure that you put it at the top of your list, and then you make a priority every single day to work on it. 30 minutes a day, you can get a business school application done. An hour a day, you could write a 200-page book. A page a day for a year and you got a book done. Block off at least 30 minutes. Ideally, the first 30 minutes of the day or the last 30 minutes before you completely run out of energy, and devote it to your big ticket item, your red circled item. You do that and you're much more likely to get it done. So again, I ask you, what's your OBI? What is your one big yes that you would like to get done during 2021? Chances are it's something that's not going to happen if you don't make this commitment. Word number 8, PUA. You can see it behind me here. Proceed until apprehended. Because leadership does not require a management title. Whenever we work with a hospital, and most of our work is hospitals, we give them a PUA, a proceed until apprehended banner. And as a reminder that management is a job description, leadership is a life decision. Management is something you do, leadership is who you are. Management expects compliance, leadership seeks commitment. Management is transactional, running the business. Leadership is transformational, changing people. And in today's VUCA world, that's a military term for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. We need leadership in every corner, not just in the corner office. So to proceed until apprehended means to not assume that you got to have somebody else's permission to do something that's important to you, that you go ahead and start it. If you have to get help, you ask for it. Do you ever get apprehended? Of course, sometimes you do. So my question for you is, what's the PUA commitment that you'll make for yourself in 2021? And one last word, horoscope. Not horoscope, you know, do you read a horoscope? Most of us don't. I read my horoscope every single day. This is one from last Friday. And what I do is the night before, I sit down, I write it out in longhand, I type it into an email, and I email it to myself so that it's what I see first thing the next morning. And I keep them all in a Word document. It's now about 45 pages long. I've been doing it for years. A good week will wrap up on a high note with unexpected great news on the family front. Pursue a seemingly silly idea with enthusiasm, and you'll be astonished at how it eventually blossoms into something meaningful. A message from out of the blue will spark a new adventure, but pay attention because the opportunity won't be obvious. And a worry that's been keeping you awake at night will turn out to have been paying interest on a debt you don't even owe. Jonathan Swift said, vision is the art of seeing the invisible. What the horoscope does is it helps you see the invisible. What are things that you want to have happen that you don't have any control over? What are the things you want to see come from out of the blue? Who are the people that you would love to meet? When you write it out in your own horoscope and send it to yourself as an email, you set yourself mentally to start paying attention to what's happening in your world. You say, maybe that's from out of the blue. I have made friends, I have found business opportunities, and every now and then something that I had no control over has just happened, and I have no way of explaining why or how, because I'm convinced I wrote it in my horoscope and didn't trust a weird stranger to do it for me. Thoreau said, build your castles in the air. That's where they belong. Now do the work to put foundations under them. You can remember the future more clearly and more accurately than you can remember the past. It is really the difference between wishful thinking and positive thinking. Wishful thinking is hoping for something and waiting for someone else to make it happen. Positive thinking is expecting something and then doing the work to make it happen. Define your future by your dreams, not by your memories. Look ahead, not back. By your hopes, not by your fears. That's how you create memories of the future. And again, if you signed up for this, I'm going to send you our 10-point plan for how do you create a memory of the future. And I'll ask you, what's your memory of the future for 2021? Let me wrap up with this thought. You become the lion in your mirror by changing the words that you use to describe yourself and your world, by seeing something different in the mirror, and then by doing the work to become that person. There are a lot of definitions of leadership and what a leader is. This is mine. A leader is someone who helps you achieve goals that you did not know you could achieve by becoming the person that you did not know you could be. And leadership of other people begins with self-leadership. You want to help other people achieve their goals and become their best selves. It begins by you making that commitment to yourself. So what are you going to do as we hopefully see a challenging 2020 disappear into the rearview mirror and look ahead? How are you going to take some of the things we've talked about today? Winston Churchill famously said, "It's a shame to waste a good crisis. I suppose even more a shame to waste a bad crisis." How are you going to take this crisis that we've gone through in the year 2021 or 2020 and take what you've learned, take how you've grown, take the things that we've talked about on this program and make 2021 a much better year? So Garrett, I want to thank you and the MedEvac Foundation staff for including me. And for all the rest of you, good luck and Godspeed as we hopefully head toward the light at the end of this tunnel.